Hi, giant schnauzer breeders. Today I'm going to do a pepper salt comparison and potentially test breeding today. I am first going to use this male, Lucaval Washington and Mara. Again, if I butcher any names, I'm so sorry. So let's go to his profile and take a look at him. Okay, so as usual, you can see his sire and dam and his genetic information here. He is heterozygous for DLA types. His outlier index is greatly different than what is typical for your breed. Right around 0.3 is where your breed average is. So he's atypical for this tested population now. In part, this might be because he is pepper salt, which is very different from the black schnauzers, so it could be because of that. He's very unrelated from the rest of the dogs in the database, but he does have a slightly higher, basically the same IR as your breed average is. His homozygosity by locus is another inbreeding score. You can see he's right around breed average, and he's unrelated to 86.14% of the breed. Now, again, that could be because he is a pepper salt. Here's his health information that's been entered into our database. No temperament, appearance is pepper salt. And you can contact owner if you don't know who the owner is through our website. If he'd uploaded a picture, or if there was an uploaded picture, it would be here. I'm going to go to breeding tools and show you our comparison tool. So I'm going to look at Farah, and you only have to enter a little bit of a name. Let's see, I may have spelled it wrong. Terra Verdis. Sorry. I don't know everybody's kennel names. Terra. So you can just enter a part of a name and it'll pull up all the dogs that have this. So here's the 2 dogs in the database that have that name. Let me see which one's the bitch. Jenga. So we want Jenga. So I'm going to pull up this comparison tool, which will compare dogs side by side. You can compare 2 potential studs. You can compare a male to female. You can compare puppies, and this can help you decide which ones you may keep from your litters, and so on and so forth. So they are category 10, which means they're unrelated. So if I'm considering doing a pepper salt breeding, this might be one that would be good. Even though they're category 10, we're still going to want to do a test breeding with them so that we can see how their IR looks. Okay, so we have a thunderstorm here, so that's what that noise was. Average genetic relatedness. The more negative this is, the more unrelated dogs are to the other dogs in our database. Both are very unrelated to dogs in our database, and again, this can be because they are pepper salt, which is very different from the black population. So some people might want to consider breeding black to pepper salt, as we've discussed in the Facebook group, using the color testing to help you breed back to the color type that you would like. Here's the health results that have been added for each of these. Okay, so let's take a look at the DLA types. They share a DLA type, which means that 25% of the puppies will have that same DLA type, but then the other 75% will be heterozygous. So when all else is equal, we say to consider the DLA types in breedings. Okay, inbreeding. This particular female has a fairly high internal relatedness score, which means she's fairly inbred. Now, this is usually easy to reduce in the next generation, but we will see when we run their test breeding what the average IR for the litter and what the ranges are. Okay, alleles. This tells you how typical or atypical for the population a dog is. That's what the outlier index is. The breed average is 0.3. Both are well above, so the puppies will be very atypical for the population that's been tested at UC Davis. Now, as more and more of the population is tested and added to our database, we will know more about both OI and AGR, so this will change a bit as more and more dogs are tested. This kind of tells you how typical or atypical the dogs behind them are. So if they have a combined ancestry that's high, that means that one of the sires and dams was very different. So one of his sire or dam might have been very different because his combined ancestry is high. She has some very unusual ancestry, but they both have typical ancestry. And since we're a breed, there's always going to be typical ancestry. And here you can see where there's potential for their alleles to be the same, homozygous, at all the different markers. So that's something to consider. or some people like to consider. So I'm going to go back to his profile and let's create their actual test breeding. So when I do my breedings, I go by OI because I want to try to breed away from a bottleneck in my breed. And AGR will sort for mates who are least related to the other dogs in our database. Genetic relatedness will create your categories, but you also get categories in these two. So the categories mean unrelated to related. So we'll look at that in just a second. And then you can go potential breedings by color. So if you want to be breeding for pepper salt, you can go here and it'll pull up pepper salt. So I'm going to go genetic value to the breed because I personally like to try to breed away from bottlenecks, and it's habit for me. Okay, so let's find her. Oh, here she is. His number 2 suggested breeding. Now along here, so up here, category 10 all the way down to 1. 1 would be twins. This would be full siblings, parent offspring, 3/4 siblings, sibling cousins, so on and so forth, all the way up to 10. So we generally recommend 6 to 10, but 10 is the equivalent of unrelated. So I'm going to create their test breeding, and I'm going to do 3,000 because that is the most, it'll give you the most information in your summary. I'm going to push breed, and you have to wait while it simulates all those puppies. So here in the list, these first 3 numbers are the numbers attributed to Jenga, this female. So her outlier index, her average genetic relatedness, and her internal relatedness. This number here is how closely related the 2 in this breeding pair are with one another. So you can see they have not the lowest number in this list, but they're unrelated. You can scroll down and kind of get an idea with all the other ones too. So, okay, my summary is done. So let's see how high their inbreeding score goes. Okay, so as predicted, or as I was thinking, since they both have common ancestry behind them, or typical ancestry behind them, and they're both pepper salts, and both have a higher IR themselves, their average IR for the litter is above 0. Generally, we recommend a breeding, I recommend a breeding average be at or below 0 if you are able to, because that will mean most of your litter is less inbred. Up here is the 0.15 mark, which is right where Dr. Peterson says that you kind of hit a higher inbreeding score. So the female in this breeding had a fairly high inbreeding measurement. So the average of this litter is below, and none of them are up where she was. So there's improvement there. And your outlier index, you can see your minimum is right at your breed average all the way up to very high for the breed. So how typical or atypical for the breed, these puppies would be fairly atypical or at your breed average. Now again, since this population kind of has 2 subdivisions, you kind of have to also consider that when you're looking at this. But again, it depends on what the pedigree is. Pedigree, risk, temperament, type, structure, everything we've always bred for before, we can't throw out when we are looking at these considerations. So this is just an example of a potential pepper salt breeding. Now, I haven't looked at all the different pepper salts in the database, but it might be there may be a potential that they all kind of have some relation behind them. So they all kind of might have IRs that are around a little bit higher on the spectrum. I don't know for sure, because this is the first one I've done as a test breeding. So again, when you're considering a test breeding, we want to consider all aspects. So OI, your DLA types, and your IR. And the IR will be your inbreeding measurements, but we also want to consider everything we ever considered before. So pedigree, temperaments, what are the goals for the breeding when we make our decisions. So thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thanks again.